What's going on, everyone? Tonight is Thursday, October 22nd, and we have the Thursday night game tonight between the Giants and the Eagles. Two pretty bad teams with not a whole lot of talent, especially with all of the injuries. Obviously, Saquon's out for the season. Miles Sanders is out this week. So there's not a whole lot of talent for either team, but there are a few angles that you might be able to take on the single game slates on FanDuel and DraftKings. So let's go ahead and let's get right into it. First of all, let's take a look at all the different projections for FanDuel. Let me go ahead and let me filter for just the utility spot so we could just see the overall projections. And right now I have it sorted from highest to lowest as far as projection. And you see right away that the top projection is Carson Wentz. I think that's pretty obvious. Next, Daniel Jones. And then third, we have Boston Scott, who is going to be getting the start tonight for Miles Sanders on the Eagles. And he's only $6,500 on FanDuel. So he's a guy that obviously is going to be pretty heavily owned, but you almost have to own him at $6,500. Next on the list, we got Darius Slayton, who appears to be the number one option for Daniel Jones on the Giants. Is having a pretty good season. After him, we got Devonta Freeman, who obviously is the starter for Saquon. And then Travis Fulgham. He's been playing really well. In the last two games, he has 23 targets, including a 150-yard game in week 5, I believe. So he's playing really good right now. After that, we got Deshawn Jackson, who's coming back from injury. And he hasn't really been productive this season, but he's been injured. But if you take a look at weeks 1 and 2, when he wasn't injured, he had a 9-target and a 7-target game. So he was getting targets early on in the season. He's a big play threat. So he's a guy who could kind of break the slate if he ends up having a couple big plays. Maybe he takes a couple to the house for 2 touchdowns or so, and he ends up breaking the whole slate. So Deshawn Jackson is someone you got to keep your eyes on. And then you keep going down the list. I mean, Evan Ingram, he's been kind of a bust this season. I know people had a lot higher expectations for him. He hasn't really been productive. Maybe this is the game that he ends up going off, but I don't see it happening. He might have more value on a full roster slate where you would slot him in at tight end. But on a single game slate like this, where you don't need to fill the tight end position, I don't really see any reason to put Evan Ingram on your roster, especially at that price point, $10,000 on FanDuel. I don't think he's worth it. And then just going down the list, Golden Tate, who really hasn't been productive. And then you got the 2 kickers. And then after that, you're really picking from the bottom of the barrel, just because their price is pretty high, relatively speaking. I mean, you could end up getting Boston Scott for $6,500 as opposed to any of these guys. And Boston Scott is going to get a lot more production and a lot more reps than all these other guys. And just going and looking at it, I mean, these top 5 players that I have here, Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones, Boston Scott, Darius Slayton, and Devonta Freeman, you could fit all those guys on a roster. So you could end up getting a roster on FanDuel with the top 5 players in it. And obviously, Carson Wentz is going to end up being your MVP. So if I go ahead and I run these lineups, so let me go ahead and come over here and hit generate lineups. You'll see that it has Carson Wentz, Devonta Freeman, Darius Slayton, Boston Scott, and then Daniel Jones. So like I said, those top 5 players that I was talking about all are able to fit on the roster. So this roster right here with Carson Wentz as the MVP, there's going to be a whole lot of people that have this roster. So it's not going to win you that top prize, but it is something that you could cash in because these are by far the top 5 players in the slate. So I don't see it being any other way as far as the top optimal pick. This might not end up being the best overall play. I mean, you might have someone that ends up scoring more points than Carson Wentz, and therefore they should be your MVP. And it could be any of those 4 guys. So what you want to do, you want to go ahead and try locking some of these different guys into the MVP position and then running this lineup optimizer. You can see this second lineup right here is the same exact lineup, and it has Daniel Jones at the MVP spot. And then this third lineup, it actually has Travis Fulgham in the lineup as opposed to Darius Slayton, which I think that's a very good play just because Travis Fulgham has been extremely productive. I know Deshawn Jackson's coming back this week, but still, Travis Fulgham's been pretty productive, and he could end up having a very big game. But let me show you how you go ahead and lock different players into that MVP slot. Let's say I want to put Boston Scott into that MVP slot. Well, the way I do that is simply come over here to Boston Scott where it says MVP, and then hit that little lock icon. and then hit generate lineups. So now it's making sure that Boston Scott is the MVP, and then it's optimizing the lineup around Boston Scott as the MVP. So you might want to try different variations of that just in case, Carson Wentz ends up not being the top scorer this evening. But let's go ahead and let's change the site to DraftKings. And let's go ahead and run 3 lineups. Pretty much a similar lineup, except it picks up the two kickers, but Carson Wentz as the captain position, Freeman, Boston Scott, Daniel Jones, and then Jake Elliott and Graham Gano. And then the second lineup here has Daniel Jones as the MVP, or the captain rather. This lineup number 3 ends up picking Wayne Gallum because he's so damn cheap. He's $800. Who knows? Maybe he gets a touchdown or a good amount of receptions in the pass game as a third down back or something of that nature. So I think Wayne Gallum at $800 on DraftKings is a pretty good value pick, and he is someone that could end up breaking the slate. You could go ahead and play with this optimizer tool, try to check out different variations of the different lineups for tonight. This optimizer is only available for members only, but you could sign up for a free 7-day trial. You can cancel anytime before the 7 days are done and not be charged. But I suggest to everyone making sure that when you're entering lineups into these single game and showdown slates, that you're using some sort of a tool, some sort of an optimizer, some sort of projections, because if you're just blindly doing it, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage. Make sure you shoot this video a thumbs up, subscribe to us on all the different social media platforms if you're not already subscribed, and good luck to everyone tonight.